First, we're going to have our roundtable discussion about contactee experiences and UFOs and a little bit of paranormal. We have Karen Holton and Preston Dennett joining us. Karen, Preston, how are y'all doing?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, doing great.
Yeah,
Pretty
welcome.
excited.
Yes, I am very excited. Excited to hear your presentations. Yeah, before we get started there, um, now I want to talk about something that we talked a little bit about on your show, Karen, the other day with Preston. We're talking about encounters with grays and other beings, and there's so many accounts of grays, not only grays but other beings wearing these tight little jumpsuits, and I find that so fascinating. That they have it's like they're in sight, a type of uniform. Some of them have little emblems on them. What are your thoughts on that, Preston? Do you think there's some kind of like a galactic federation or some kind of you know organized group that has these little emblems and jumpsuits for multiple races?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Often people who have contact were like, well, no, I didn't see any clothes. I think these guys were naked. I think probably in some cases they are. I think probably in a lot of these cases, no, these are skin tight jumpsuits, which I think are so popular because they work. I mean, this is definitely something we see a lot. Emblems on uniforms are not as common, but certainly do turn up. I've heard all different kinds of emblems. Usually it's some weird little symbol, perhaps, or a winged serpent. I've seen that a few times, or like a phoenix type thing. But again, not super common. Usually these jumpsuits are featureless. There's no buttons, zippers, or anything on them really at all. One lady I talked to said it was a mandarin, what did she say? An olive green jumpsuit with a little mandarin collar, skin tight all the way up to the wrists, and often will wear boots. People have described tinfoil-like uniforms, silver. But really, there's a wide variety of clothes ETs wear. I've heard tunics, cloaks, robes, large collars coming up. That's not uncommon, or even hoods. Heard that several times. Another very interesting thing I heard, I think I first heard it from Whitley Strieber. He said the Greys came to his room and they were dressed in pinstripe suits, with old time zoot suits type of thing, which completely freaked him out. He thought perhaps they were trying to do it to reduce his fear factor. It didn't work for him. Kind of freaked him out a little bit. And I started hearing more of that. I heard a case from MUFON where a guy said, yeah, they came and they were wearing this sort of tuxedo type suit. And one lady I interviewed personally, same thing. She comes home one evening and there are 3 Greys in her living room and one is wearing a suit, a classic men's suit. And she bust up laughing. And she felt it was, them having a little bit of a sense of humor and trying to reduce the fear factor. And it totally worked in her case. She thought it was hilarious. And yeah, we see all kinds of stuff like this. ET's wearing normal clothes. And for that matter, dressed up in all kinds of things, especially for kids. This is sort of related to this screen memory phenomena, I think, but in some cases not. I think they're physically dressing up as, say, clowns. I collected a bunch of cases from that when I had like 3 or 4, and I started researching. I'm like, Bud Hopkins had cases like this. Bunch of researchers did, where ETs will dress up as clowns. I think because they see this in our culture and assume, people love clowns. And this is a good way to just sort of reduce the fear factor, and because we're scared of people who look very different from us. I'm not sure it worked that well. Now there's, chlorophobia, dread fear of clowns is very common in our society. And we have all kinds of horror movies that focus on this. So I'm not sure how well that worked, but boy, I've heard everything. Dressed up as teddy bears, as Barbie dolls, as superheroes. I mean, you name it. And I'm not sure this is what I would call the screen memory phenomena, where people are left with a memory of seeing a very large owl or a deer or something along those lines. I think they're physically dressing up in some of these cases. Cowboys, I've heard that. they wear a big cowboy hat. The lady was a horse person. She loved horses. And this ET came in with that cowboy hat on and a little fake mustache. So they have all kinds of uniforms, and the jumpsuit, yeah, I think is very, very common, and probably is used to protect them from perhaps the harmful elements of our planet, be it germs or bacteria or viruses or the weather and things like this. But yeah, absolutely very common. And I think probably in most cases where people think these guys are not wearing clothes, they're probably wearing a jumpsuit. But I'm a little on the fence about that because often people will describe them being, no, they were nude, I'm pretty sure, particularly on board the craft, which is, so maybe we are dealing with gray nudists, I don't know. But yeah, the uniforms is very interesting. I want to do a whole study project on that.
Yeah, that is. What about you, Karen? What do your guys wear whenever you're interacting?
Well, it's there quite a lot of diversity, which I'll get into in my presentation tomorrow. So I don't want to spoil it too much today. But I do want to say that, first of all, these beings do have very strong psychic abilities. And I think sometimes they will influence our perceptions, and they will let us see them in whatever way they want us to see them. So I think that might be a part of it. Another part of it is that human beings in our world is extremely toxic. People have not yet woken up to how toxic we are. We have been, without our permission, without our knowledge, we've been used to filter all kinds of industrial waste, like fluoride and chlorine and radiation and smart dust and God knows what. So, I mean, if let's assume that people who are capable of travel through space or be interdimensionals, we would assume they would also have a handle on their health. They would want to protect their bodies from becoming contaminated. So it makes sense that they would wear some kind of a layer over their skin to protect them. And the other thing too is Bob the Gray, who's my contact, he told me that when we see beings with the big almond-shaped black eyes, often they're wearing contact lenses for a variety of reasons. So we may be seeing them, just say that's their version of skin protection and PPE or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So it might be that. But on the big ship, there's a lot of diversity in fashion and clothing style. Some people don't like to wear a lot. Some people like to wear all kinds of layers. It all depends. Like, the big thing is we can't think of ET in human-centric terms because they are not like us. They've never had our culture, our brainwashing, or the propaganda. They have a measure of health that we can't even imagine. And then one other thing I want to quickly touch on is Bob, when I first started seeing him, he would wear a fedora, and it made me laugh every time. And he's the kookiest guy. Like, you would never expect this from an ET. He's into Michael Jackson music and Frank Sinatra, and he's just a riot. And he keeps things very light for me, which is a good thing. And so I've never seen like little grays and jumpsuits, so I can't speak to that, but it does make sense to me that they would have some personal protection equipment. Absolutely.
Definitely. I want to remind everybody we got a little while left for the roundtable discussion, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the chat. We'd be happy to get to those. We got a few minutes left. All right, so I want to get to something that me and Corey here have been interested in lately. Since we moved to Colorado, we've been going out to the mountains and wilderness, and I've been getting more synchronicities with Bigfoot lately. I'm getting more guests, just things happening here and there that are just like pointing to Bigfoot. Let's start with you, Preston. what do you think of the Bigfoot phenomenon? Do you think it's in some way connected to the ET phenomenon? Because there's so many accounts where, there may be a UFO seen near or around a sighting. These beings are said to disappear into nowhere. Their footprints will just vanish, which may indicate interdimensional travel or something like that. What do you think about Bigfoot? Do you think he's an extraterrestrial or just a hominid that got left behind?
Bigfoot, yeah. Boy, that was something I resisted looking into because I thought, oh, it's probably real. It's going to be a can of worms. And yeah, sure enough, it was. And I resisted looking into it because I'm like, oh God, that's going to be another big thing. That's going to rock my worldview. Am I ready for this? But yeah, I had to look into it because I got my first case from a guy in Canyon Country, great witness, a radiologist. Canyon Country is a pretty remote area outside of LA, borders the LA National Forest, a very big wilderness area, which turns out to have a history of Bigfoot encounters, I found out. But he had an encounter where a UFO landed in his backyard, and the very next night, he had a Bigfoot encounter. He heard it roaring. He had a telepathic link with it. I'm like, whoa, telepathy. That turns out to turn up quite a bit in Bigfoot accounts. Following that, he had a poltergeist outbreak. I'm like, wow, this is 3 phenomena coming at once. And so there is this weird connection. And I looked into the whole Bigfoot connection when I got another case of a lady who was a contactee and started having really strong Bigfoot encounters. She actually took me out to this area where she lived in Acton, which again borders the other side of the national forest. And this was at dusk, and she's like, I think it lives in this area here. And we had no sooner gotten out of the car when I heard a very loud roar. And she turned pale and she ran back to the car. And I'm running towards it because I'm like, wow, is this Bigfoot? And it roared again. And oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. So that was my first Bigfoot encounter firsthand. I heard this thing roar, and I can tell you for sure it wasn't a bear. I love bears. I've heard a lion roar right next to me in the zoo. This was not that. This was something else. And I think it was a Bigfoot. And I'm not convinced they're ETs. I think they've been on this planet for a very long time. I think they're sentient. I think there's many different types. Some might be what we would think of as simple primates, but a lot of these guys know. I think they're absolutely sentient and super spiritually evolved and do have the ability to sort of move from the physical dimension as we think of it and raise up a vibration. Because over and over again, I've heard these accounts where they have turned invisible. And I have to tell you, there are, like you mentioned, many, many accounts. I'm talking at least 50 that I know of. And I think there's a lot more than that, where they are directly associated with UFOs, and not only being seen at the same time, but being seen going into a craft or coming out of a craft or standing next to grays. I mean, there's a case in Colorado, the Colorado Ranch, where a guy came upon a landed saucer, human-looking ETs standing there, and there was a Bigfoot, and it was kind of like being partners with these human-looking ETs. I'm absolutely convinced Sasquatch and Bigfoot is real. The evidence for it is absolutely compelling. If you don't believe in it, you haven't done your homework. Same with UFOs. Any objective person who looks at the evidence, I think, has to come away convinced that we are sharing our planet with Bigfoot. Accounts stretch back hundreds of years, longer actually, if you look at oral traditions with Native Americans and other cultures. Bigfoot is real. I think they're largely benevolent. Many cases of people being rescued by Bigfoot, whether it's from being lost in the wilderness or a little girl bit by a snake. Bigfoot picked her up and took her back to camp. One guy was trapped under a fallen tree. Bigfoot came and lifted the tree up. But they're not always friendly. They can scare the living daylights out of people. They're often not someone you want to mess around with because they will come at you and scare you. But I don't think there's really any accounts where it's gone real bad to the point of, murder or death or anything like this. That's extremely rare. I think almost unheard of. So these guys are definitely on our planet, have been around a long time, and are staying out of view as much as they can and have the ability to do it. And that's why I don't think we have absolute conclusive evidence in the public arena, because they have the ability to shift into the other dimension. But yeah, I'm a Bigfoot nut now. I'm totally sure they're real. I'm having my own, I had another Bigfoot encounter on Mount Baldy, having Bigfoot dreams recently. So yeah, I love those guys. And
yeah, what is it with Bigfoot? I don't know. They're creeping in everywhere. They're creeping in my subconscious. What about you, Karen? You ever had any Sasquatch experiences or thoughts on Bigfoot?
I do. I don't know what it is, but maybe once we've had some profound paranormal experiences, we're just open to everything. It just seems. Well, I recently, moved to Alberta now about 4 years ago, but I spent most of my time, in British Columbia, which is a lot of Bigfoot hotspots there. So, for instance, when I was on Vancouver Island, I never personally had any experience with Bigfoot, but there's always people claiming, to have had Bigfoot encounters, and it was just very common, and it was just considered, a part of unexplained mysteries. Let's put it that way. Then I found out that the Squamish tribe, which is on the Lower Mainland, Squamish is a little town, but there's a First Nations group that are the Squamish First Nations people, and apparently they have still to this day young men who want to take on a spiritual path. They'll go off into the wilderness, and they don't take anything with them. They just are naked and they exist out there, and they learn how to cover themselves with natural things, and it's a very, very high spiritual calling. And sometimes they may come across as being Sasquatch or Bigfoot when actually they are Indigenous people. And then another thing is, I went a couple times to Harrison Hot Springs, and up there, that's also Bigfoot country. And I actually tried to make contact with ET on a telepathic level. I walked out into the woods by the lake, and I sat down on a log, and I tried to make contact, but I wasn't able to. But I did get a sense that they were there, but not close, just like quite a ways away. But I didn't really get any kind of a thing. But what I did get, and this was interesting, was I picked up that there is actually a spirit in the water that heals people, and the native people called it Wamchuk. And so when I was in the water, in the hot springs, I don't know how to explain this, because it's not an earth experience or a human experience. It's an earth experience, but not a human experience. I don't really have words for it, but I felt like I connected to the healing quality that was in the water, and I gave it gratitude for its gift of healing. And so it's kind of a little bit close related, but not really. But I also want to tell you that there's lots of stories of an incident. I don't know how true it is, but there has been the odd reporting of women being abducted by Bigfoot to, they never come back, but they basically are turned into wives. They're actually chosen as mates. And so the big thing on Vancouver Island is, if you're a woman, don't go off walking in the woods alone, because you might end up with a new daddy. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it's another of the local folklore from where I was living.
That's very interesting. All right, now we just have a very few minutes left. Like I said, if anyone has any last minute questions or comments, please leave those in the chat. To close out, I want to get your thoughts on what's happening with disclosure right now. There's a lot going on, especially in mainstream media, and even with our government that's kind of pushing towards whatever their version of disclosure is. I'm not sure if I trust any of it. I'm paying close attention because it's interesting, and I think that there's something going on with it, but I'd like to get each of your thoughts on why do you think it's happening now, if it's some kind of preparation because they know we'll find out anyway, or is it maybe a deception that some kind of strange agenda that they have going on. I don't know. I'd like to get your thoughts on it, though. What do you think? We'll start with you, Karen.
Well, I think that things should be taken in a more of a holistic context. So when I look at Canadian history, right from the get-go, when has our government ever really had our best interests at heart? Never, never. If you really start delving into things, you'll find out everything is for power and prestige and money for the elites. And that's how it's been for a very long time. That's changing now. But you take a look at our society and all what's going on with health and government and all of that fiasco. It's insane what's going on. So do you really think these same people are going to be all kind and giving us the truth and going to really come out with disclosure? I don't think so. It just doesn't jive with me. Now, what I do think is that disclosure's been happening for a long time. So read Preston Dennett's books if you want to know more. Go to the ET researchers, go to the experiencers and find out about it. Because to be honest with you, there might be some ET beings that are dealing diplomatically with our world rulers. But trust me, it's just more nonsense, more human and more nonsense going on. I mean, they don't need to go and get permission from Trudeau to have contact with me or to influence government. Like, to me, that makes no sense whatsoever. When they can just be in direct contact with us and start, I think they are starting a spiritual movement. I think they are raising our awareness on, how to care for the planet and be better stewards and all that kind of stuff, helping us with our health, all that kind of stuff. Why would they even need to go to the government? So I think the governments have a very limited contact awareness and experience. And I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. And I don't care what they come up with. I'm not going to believe that as much as I'm going to believe my own experiences, my friends that I resonate with. That is where I'm going to for disclosure. And so I'm kind of opinionated on that whole thing, but that's how I see it.
Very good. Yeah. I have a very similar opinion on that one. What do you think, Preston? What do you think's going on with this UFO madness?
Yeah, I agree with Karen. I do. Our governments have a long history of deception and corruption and suppression. But we do see disclosure ramping up. And I think it's sort of like the civil rights movement, something our government absolutely did not embrace and were pushed into. And I think that's kind of what's happening with disclosure. This appears to be an ET agenda from the very beginning. I do believe they went to the government and asked for disclosure, and we just said no. There's the famous Eisenhower meeting at Edwards Air Force Base in 1954, where that was a talking point. And we're like, no, we're not doing it. It's going to upset religion and politics and economics and so on. And so they are doing a grassroots movement. And that's why we see the Phoenix Lights, the Hudson Valley Wave, Gulf Breeze, the Topanga Canyon Wave, Belgium Wave, the wave in France. They are doing a publicity campaign. And that's going to be part of what my presentation is going to be about, how these guys are announcing their presence over schools and drive-in theaters. I think our government has been forced to disclose, because if they don't, they're going to lose complete control of the situation, which that's what they want, control. And they are at a point now where people don't trust them. We know they're hiding stuff, and if they don't disclose, well, they're going to lose all power, and they don't want that. So I think there is going to be disclosure. This was rumored since the beginning. Since I got into this field, they're like, disclosure is coming, and it never did. And now we have seen actual movement. The Pentagon said flat out, we have material from otherworldly vehicles. That's huge. That's front page news. And guess what? It wasn't front page news. It slipped right under the radar. I don't think we're going to have real disclosure until we see the craft, the bodies. People are just not going to care. They're more interested in reality TV or what have you. And I'm concerned about how our government is spinning this into a negative phenomena. I don't buy it for a second. If a UFO is attacking and killing people, that's us. I don't think these guys are here to harm us at all. No, no, no. So I'm concerned about how they're going to roll this disclosure out. I think there's going to be some major steps towards this. And I think at some point, the ETs might just do it themselves, because they could do it overnight, but they don't want to upset our society. We need to grow up ourselves. As every parent knows, you can't do everything for your child because they won't learn. We have to learn how to heal ourselves. We have to learn how to govern ourselves. They're not going to just step in and take over. But I think that they might get forced into open official contact. And I think if we can just do our own process of disclosure, which is exactly what Karen says, is what we're doing. And for that matter, there has been presidents who've seen UFOs and said so, and governors and senators and representatives. I mean, look at Paul Hellyer, former defense minister of Canada, one of the highest level of government officials. And he says, yeah, multiple ET races are visiting us. This is disclosure. It's happening now. For the Pentagon to say we have otherworldly material is a little disingenuous, because right behind the curtain there is not a piece of metal. It's the craft. It's the bodies. And they showed us this tic-tac footage, which is great in the pilot testimony. That was movement. But you know what? They have so much better footage. Apparently this Eisenhower meeting was filmed. I'd like to see that. So I want full-on disclosure. I want truth. I want transparency. I want them to be forthcoming. I'm not sure the US is going to do it, but somebody's going to do it at some point. We are evolving. We are progressing. Our vibration is raising. I am an optimist by nature. I think that ultimately we will progress to a peaceful, truthful society. We may have some real rough times ahead if we don't embrace this in a more wholehearted way. But I'm encouraged that there is movement, but I'm just not trusting of our government. I'm sorry, I'm not. So I'm worried.
Yeah, I can see that definitely. Okay, we got one question, and that's probably all we're gonna have time for. Stardust Moon asks, "Do any of you believe that they are living among us?" That's a really good question. See, I'm not sure, because I've never seen one that I know of. I'm seeing people that I question if they're aliens or not, but I don't know. What do you think, Karen? What do you think, that did they walk among us?
I think they do. And I think more than we could ever imagine. And and for a whole lot of different reasons. And personally, I've actually seen a couple. Wow, I'm very energy sensitive, and I'm telling you, that's how I noticed right away. And then when I physically really looked at them, I noticed a little bit of difference. So I've seen probably twice, and it was just random chance, or maybe not, that I had exposure. But it was just very fleeting. It wasn't like we were friends hanging out or anything like that. But I think they are among us. I think more than what we realize. And that's okay. But you see, humans, we've been real slow on the uptake here. We're having trouble just with other humans of different skin tones or different philosophies. Boy, if you can't get a handle on that, how are you going to get a handle on the fact that your neighbors might actually be, excuse me, from a different star system? So, we got to really do a lot of wake up and smell the intergalactic coffee here. So anyway, sorry, yes, my answer is yes.
All right, very good. What about you, Preston? You think they're walking among us?
Yep, my answer is yes. I do. And I think that comes in a number of different forms. I think we have, a lot of human-looking ETs. It's perfectly logical that they would walk among us. But they also, grays certainly, and reptilians for that matter. All ETs do have the ability to put on what I would call disguise, or make us see what we want to see. And I have to tell you, there have been a lot of accounts of that. I know one lady, this is an account I think from Florida, where a lady was seduced by a very handsome gentleman at a gas station, and not something she would normally do, but took him home and became amorous. And no, that was a gray. It changed its appearance, and she saw it for who it was. So I wonder if some people in our government are, reptilians in disguise. I don't know, but people have seen ETs where you would never ever think. I remember Charles Hall of the Tall Whites talked about ETs in casinos. Well, I've got a number of accounts of that. People have seen. Bud Hopkins had a case where a lady saw a gray on a subway. I know of a case of a lady who saw an ET at Penn Station. Another lady was abducted from a sidewalk cafe in New York City. They are walking among us. There's a very famous contactee, John Hunter Gray, who had a classic encounter, missing time with gray ETs. They healed him, by the way. But immediately prior to the encounter, he was at a gas station, and there was this short little guy all dressed up in sunglasses and a fisherman's cap, peering at them with these beady eyes. And they all felt, oh, who is this guy? It's so strange. Why is he looking at us? And this guy followed them in his car. They'd slow down, he'd slow down. They'd speed up, he'd speed up. And this went on for several miles until suddenly he turns off, and boom, they were abducted. So he's there driving around in a car, and they think it was an ET. They totally associate this guy with their encounter. And I know of another case where a girl was at Westmoreland High School and was approached by this very strange looking gentleman with snow white hair, very sort of almond shaped eyes and pointy ears and weird clothes. And he started to encourage her to go to his white vehicle over there in the field. And she's like, no, I'm not going. Who are you, creep? And he started asking her questions. She's like, I have to go play volleyball. He's like, what's volleyball? And just didn't understand things that everyone should know. And later on, she saw him in a liquor store, and he was peering at her again, a convenience store. And she had this missing time experience, goes under hypnosis. And who's there? It's this guy who she saw at school and the store. This happened to Bud Hopkins' star client, Debbie Jordan, I think was her name. She saw a human-looking ET on a bus. So this, I think, is far more common. I know of cases in restaurants and stores, and you name it. I do think they are among us, absolutely.
Yes, that's a very compelling argument, and I'd be very interested to see one myself. But Preston, Karen, great discussion. Thank you both for doing this, and I'm looking very forward to seeing your presentations. Preston, you're going to be up at, 2:30 Mountain Time. It's in a couple hours. And next up, we have Jim Willis. So everybody stick around. We are going to be back in about 10 minutes or so with Jim Willis. And thank you again, Karen and Preston, and I'll see you guys again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was great, guys. Thank you so much.